Hi, everybody. Welcome back to this. I'm your host, Shauna Griffiths, and today's Real Talk is with a real leader who's become a dear friend of mine. She's an absolute legend in the sports and entertainment industry, and I actually knew of her before I knew her. So Amy Scheer, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh my God, it's my pleasure. Anytime I get to spend an hour with you, it's a win. I'm happy, right where I want to be.
Oh, you're amazing. Folks, literally. So I was in the New York City marketplace in the sports and entertainment industry for about 13 years. And I swear everyone knew Amy, Amy this, Amy that. And I was like, I want to know Amy. And I had this literally, when I knew I was going to finally meet you, I had like this fangirl moment. I was like so excited that I would finally be able to meet Amy. And since then, you truly have just become such a trusted and true friend and supporter. And I just, again, I oozing with gratitude. So thank you for that. Thank you for all that you do for the industry, that you do for women in the industry. It's pretty amazing.
Well, I don't know if it's amazing. I mean, I think I've been pretty lucky, right? I've had a pretty good run so far. Certainly did nothing on my own. But listen, we're all really privileged because we get to do what we love to do. And yeah, I mean, if someone said that this is how my career was going to end up when I graduated college, I would have said, I'll take it. So I feel like I rolled the dice and I won.
Oh, absolutely. So let's get into that actually, which is your career evolution, because you have had senior roles at some of the biggest names in the industry, everything from Madison Square Garden, the New York Liberty, and the Nets, and the Red Bulls, and NYCFC, and now as VP of Business Operations for the Connecticut Sun. You even had your own consulting business at one time. I mean, you've been on both sides, the women, the men, you've been in different sports. I mean, it's incredible. And to your point, when you graduated from college, there's no way they had this crystal ball, right? So how'd you get from there to here?
I mean, I think a lot of luck and a lot of people who believed in me. I think when I started with the New Jersey Nets, my boss, Jimmy Lamparello, had this belief in me. And I actually don't even know why today. I probably should ask him because we still talk every now and again. But listen, when I started with the Nets, I volunteered for everything and anything. If they needed someone to do something, I raised my hand. They needed somebody to figure something out, I raised my hand. So while my purview might have been A, I was lucky to learn, C through Z just by raising my hand. And I think by doing that, I sort of became that like jack of all trades, which was sort of, I guess, a perfect setup for the rest of my career, right? Because the Liberty, the WNBA, you need to be able to do everything. There's less resources. So working for niche teams and niche leagues, you sort of have to have that jack of all trades mindset. And I think, having that first job with the Nets and raising my hand sort of set me up for that. It set me up for having I guess, a career sort of never having worked for the biggest team in the market, but having worked for teams in big markets for big companies, and figuring out ways to get things done. I think the Nets set me up for that. But yeah, I think it's because I raised my hand.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's so smart. And thank you for sharing that, because we have people of all stages of their careers who listen to this. And I think it's so great to share that because, similarly, and I actually didn't, until we did this, I forgot that you had worked at the Nets because I had spent 7.5 years there early in my career. Yeah. And, similarly did so many different things. But I do think, again, similarly, like things I did in the WNBA that I worked in, which now the G League, but was the NBDL. And so really, I think doing many different things and, so that you're not just stuck in one seat doing one thing, it really does help. I talk about it as like tools in your toolbox that you can then pull from later. And it really sets you up to be able to do so many different things and have different perspectives.
Yeah, I mean, when I interview people now, and whether they're coming in at an entry-level job and have had multiple internships, or someone's coming in that has multiple jobs, I always ask them what their takeaway has been from each stop. What did they learn, good and bad? Because every leader, every teammate, every job provides different challenges and different opportunities. And so I'm always curious what people learn at their different stops and what are the things that they come away with that they implement or use or don't use in the next stop. So having the opportunity to work in different teams, different leagues, and have different leaders is huge, because it provides perspective, it provides learnings, both good and bad.
Yeah.
So I always ask that question, take me through, the evolution of your career, and what was the biggest takeaway from each stop?
Yeah, absolutely. And you think that's probably one of the biggest lessons that you learned in that journey is that value of having different roles?
Yeah, I think so. And I think so, right? Like, working at Madison Square Garden is probably the ultimate career challenge, because just the way the organization is such a matrix, you really have to learn how to maneuver and befriend everybody and make a case for people to want to work with you because it might be outside their purview. So you literally come out of MSG and you feel like you could do anything, because you sort of have been through the biggest sort of, I guess, challenge of your career, going from an organization like the Nets, where everybody was very close and we were sort of one team, to then going into a place that is a matrix. You come out like, okay, I need to figure this out, and you start to think more strategic, because you have to understand, how am I going to cross the line? I can't do it myself.
Oh,
So, MSG was big on understanding strategy. Grand Central Terminal, outside of sports, was, I understood that I could never be the smartest person in the room. It's not good for anybody. I understood, for me as an employee, or as I need to be challenged. And I need that someone above me or beside me to challenge me. And I missed that. Working for niche leagues like MLS, you have to be creative. You have to think differently. You have to figure out how to get more done with less. How do you get people to fall in love with the sport the way you feel about it? And how do you do that in a short amount of time? So every stop brings something different, and it's you. If you don't have takeaways, I feel like you've done something wrong, or you haven't paid attention.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you talk about all these different moments that you had, and you were actually in leadership roles in all those different moments, which is a great takeaway for people. Just the amount of you continued learning and continued seeking challenge, and how much that is fulfilling in and of itself. Never this it sounds like you don't sit in complacency, which is a wonderful thing. But I do think that it comes a lot from this sense of curiosity and a sense of wanting to continue to learn.
Yeah, and I think a sense for wanting to accomplish something, right? Yeah. Like, it's if you're really passionate about your job, you want to put the organization and the people with you in a better position than when they came in. And I don't think you can do that I guess you can't do it by yourself.
No.
Right? You have to have people around you that will challenge you, that will make you better. You have to see what other teams are doing, what outside of sports is happening. How do you use that to elevate your game? Especially the WNBA, right? I want the league to be around forever and have the next generation of young women be able to make great money, have great leaders in place for the organization. So I think when the picture's bigger than you, right? And if you're making the decisions based on the company versus yourself, hopefully you leave it in better place than when you came in.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you shared all of that just so organically, because it just really shows people folks, this is leadership. This is what caring about something bigger than just yourself. This is about leaving something better than when you stepped into it. You really do embody authentic leadership. And I just feel so honored to have you sharing that here today, and, just to kind of be on the path with you and watch you. So I appreciate that. And speaking of your authenticity, that's always been something I really admire about you, is this welcoming presence, this very authentic. It seems sometimes it's a little quiet, which I love, because there's so many people who want to hog the mic and, be always the mouthpiece. But I really do admire, applaud your authentic and quiet kind of sense of confidence. And I'm curious, where have you always been this way? Is it something that you worked on? What inspired it? Because I think a lot of people are trying to figure that out for themselves.
I've never really been called quiet before, but
I didn't mean you're quiet. I mean, it's a quiet presence of leadership.
My perception. I don't know. My mom says to me that I was born a Scheer, where like all the women on my dad's side of the family were all very tough women. And
Yeah.
so my mom just says I came out like a sheer. And so I don't know, I guess it's just part of the makeup of the women on my dad's side of the family.
Yeah.
So maybe a little bit God-given, I guess, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know where
you are probably laugh at me saying quiet. I do it. It's a quiet sense I meant, and welcoming. It just, honestly, it's like this level of confidence but that doesn't feel abrasive, I don't think. And I think, as I was coming up, I felt pretty insecure for a long time. And I didn't really find my voice for a while. And we all kind of evolve and blossom, or whatever the word is, in our time. But I think there's a lot of times when people just, maybe they want to be more confident and don't really know how, and things like that. So I was just kind of, curious where it came from, but innate, folks.
I think
born into it.
we all take time to find our voice, right? I mean, I always say, when people say, where are you from? I'm like, are you kidding me? This accent is all New Jersey. I don't know how you don't know where I'm from, but I'm always just like, I'm just like a Jersey girl, and I'm never going to talk to you in the big marketing speak or all the big buzzwords. You're just going to get it how it is, for better or for worse. And it's been a positive in some places, and it's been a negative in other places, right? If people want to accept you for who you are, and others don't. So, that's why it's important to find your people and your place, because this doesn't fit in everywhere, and that's okay.
It's true. I know I was saying to you earlier, sometimes no matter what you do, or, it's not like you're going to have fans and everybody isn't always going to be a fan. So do your best. And I just appreciate your confidence.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I do think, as you go along your journey, a couple summers ago, I took the Brene Brown Dare to Lead class, right? And one of the things that I really took away from it was the story you're telling yourself could be really very different than what's actually happening. So like a lot of times now, after taking that class, I stop myself and I'm like, is this really fact, or is it the story I'm telling myself?
Oh yeah.
Right. And so you stop, it makes you think about, like, is this reality, or am I getting crazy in my head? And so, and there are plenty of times where you're just like, okay, stop this.
Yeah.
And just look at the facts and look at the situation, and don't try to read into the conversation. And so, I think you just continue to grow, and you find your voice, and you try to learn from different places, right?
Right.
So I always, when you talk about finding your voice, I always try to make sure that what's going on in my head is actually what's happening, and not the story I'm telling myself.
The story you're telling yourself. It's so great. I'm glad you shared that, because we talk a lot on here. I talk a lot in general about awareness and how much we're pausing to be aware, not only of like our surroundings, but ourselves, and how we're impacting ourselves and others. And so, it's huge, the story. I mean, I've story told myself into frenzies one too many times. So that's a great.
We all have. We all have.
Yeah. So, not only are you quite an accomplished person, you also are in a household where your wife is also incredibly accomplished. I think of you two as, such a power couple. And, I think I bring it up because the careers that you have chosen, because she's in the sports entertainment industry as well, has had an incredible career, host communication that's now IMG. I know she's worked in the NBA. She's been working with Drone Racing League as VP of marketing. I mean, that's a lot of, that's a busy schedule to manage. And I think that it's not just career, it's also a lifestyle. The sports and entertainment industry, when you're working in it as you are. And so I just would love to hear your thoughts on that. And I mean, managing that in a 24/7, 365 environment has got to be pretty intense.
Yeah, and the biggest challenge for us, I think, especially when she worked for the NBA for 19 years, and myself between the NBA and WNBA for so long, and having that overlap, the hardest part was to come home and not talk about work. And so we could actually enjoy each other versus, guess what happened today, blah, 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 or the league this or the league that, like the hardest part was to try to just leave it behind us when we would come home at night. But at the end of the day, honestly, she's been the rock because my job was much more disruptive to our schedule because of the amount of games, right?
Mm,
So I've always worked for a team, so I've always had games,
right.
so every day of the week could be disrupted, weekends. And with the league, that's not quite the same, even though her hours and the pressure is big. I've sort of been probably the bigger disruptor. So like 90% of the credit goes to her. And God bless her, man, because she's been to more basketball games than any person should ever have to go to that does not work for a team. So she's just been a big support for me more than anything, and like sort of been a rock through this.
Mm,
And so I'm very lucky that I've had someone willing to come to, out of the 16 Liberty games a year, she was probably at 13 or 14 of them. She came to so many Nets games, I can't even tell you. And NYCFC, Red Bulls games, I mean, she's been to them all. So, I mean, honestly, she's done more of the juggling than me, very selfishly.
mhm.
My biggest role is planning our vacations. Like, so
Ah,
I'm like, all right, you do so much for me. Like when it comes to vacation, I make sure I do all the planning, and that's my big role. But I guess it's kind of fun because there are stuff that I can learn from her at the league
yeah.
level, and there's stuff that I can teach her at the team level. So she's been working on some ticketing projects, so I get to be like, oh my God, ticketing, and I get to tell her all about ticketing, and but then she helps me with like other things. And so
Right.
it's kind of interesting having that league perspective and then the team perspective, and how sort of we could help each other. But she's a
Yeah.
much better person and a much bigger rock for me than I probably have been for her.
Oh, that's amazing. And I spoke about her as if she's a ghost. So Carolyn McCullough,
Yeah,
sorry
yeah,
for mispronouncing.
yeah.
And just, which is so funny that again, she was someone who I heard so much about, people in the
Yeah,
industry, CA this, CA that. And I actually
yeah.
literally haven't met her in person or
Uh-huh.
live. But, have just heard such amazing things about her as well. And I think, when I found my husband, I had this conscious choice about my priorities in my career. And so
Yeah,
I think it's an interesting thing when you're in an industry, because when I was still in that heavy sports and entertainment industry. And so
yeah,
there comes a point where you at times have to really think a bit differently when you're thinking about choosing a new role, and how that's going to affect your relationship, or you're no longer just making a decision based on yourself.
yeah,
And I was literally just curious because knowing that you're both in the industry, because John is
yeah.
not. And so I was just, curious what that perspective is like.
Yeah, I think if she worked for a team, it
Yeah.
probably would have been harder to try to juggle the two. But I just think, being a league, and there's really very few events, right? Whether it's All Star or when she went to the games, the Europe games, I would go with her because it was
Yeah.
fun. But I think for sure, definitely, has been the bigger support, and I for sure overachieved in the wife category, no doubt.
Well, that's amazing. And I look forward to meeting her someday soon too.
Yeah, it's
Um,
going to happen.
so while we're talking about, the experience and living that lifestyle and the career that is sports and entertainment, and, you've really been part of, so much change in the industry over time, right? And as I said earlier, you've been on the men's side, you've been on the women's side, and I'm as a female, as a leader. And so I'm curious, I'm specifically using the language, a gendered experience,
Mhm.
because I would imagine that early in your career, when you were at the Nets, you were most likely one of the only women in
Mhm.
rooms, in conversation, and probably catapulted to leadership positions as one of the first women. And now it's a much different, I would think it's a much different
Yeah.
experience, especially in your current role at the Connecticut Sun. I know we were talking about there's a large portion who are women. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, like, what's that evolution been like? And is it really that different that in your experience from when you started to what it is now?
I think there are some things that are different. There are some things that are not.
Yeah.
Now, I always talk about when I started with the Nets, I started in broadcasting,
Hmm.
and I'd go to the league broadcast meetings wherever they were in the country, and there were two women in the room. It was myself and this woman, Susan Stratton, who was the producer for the LA Lakers. There was the only place in my life I've ever been where there was no line for the women's room in a group of people. And over the years, you have seen that change where there's many more women now in production. And there are now women like pulling tables and holding the cameras. And so you definitely see more women in positions that were maybe not as traditional. But what I'd love to still see is women in sales. I think now when you look across teams and companies, the majority of women are in marketing, are in community relations, are in customer service roles, and maybe in leadership positions, but still in those roles. You still see less women on the sales side, whether it's tickets or partnerships. So I just would love to get more women and see more women on the sales side of our business. I think that's truly where it's still lacking.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's because that's not where women want to be, as just a very much an overall umbrella statement. Or it's like, it's just a male domain and, men hire men, as we probably would say and know and agree. But there is there's definitely been change, I'd say, holistically. I still think you find places where women still have to infiltrate. And before we started the conversation, I said to you, I was on LinkedIn yesterday and someone put a post on about how some days are better than others. And it was about how this very well-known global company talked about closing a deal. And the photo was like 10, 40 to 60-year-old white men in suits. And I just, it makes me sad.
Yeah.
It makes me a little bit sad that, that picture doesn't, I guess, it's not a microcosm of our industry, like at this point,
true.
right? And it just makes me sad that this company has yet to evolve, at least from this photo.
Yeah.
And it was a sales thing, and it's just that there should be at least 2 women in there, should be 3 women in there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, it's really true. I'm glad you brought up that example too, because when I hear that, when you just said it now, what struck me is like, there's several layers of challenge there, because there's one layer of challenge that there were 10 white, call it middle-aged men in suits, they're the only ones at the table, right? So that's number one. And then number 2, that the photo was posted. Because not that you want to hide that, but it's also like but posting that kind of thing is actually a bit of excusing it, makes, you know what I mean? Continuing that, just continuing to keep it alive. And so, when we were talking, I mentioned to you yesterday, I was on a call with a blue chip company, man who's very senior. And he literally said he was so glad to see me as a female being the chief client officer at CMD agency. And that is awesome, and so we see, as you said, in some ways it's changed, in other ways it hasn't. So, there's definitely work to be done. And I love the part that you said about, more women in sales.
Yeah. I mean, I know for sure we've been very fortunate that Mohegan Sun has supported us to build our staff out. And, in the last year, we've probably hired 10 people. We're just finishing up our hiring, but we are definitely hiring with intentionality to make sure that, our office is a microcosm of society, that, we represent everybody. We're not just, even just all white women, right? We have to be representative of the community. We have to be representative of our league. And so we definitely very much hire with intentionality.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you thank you for all you're doing to make that impact and help things evolve, help the industry evolve. And speaking of the industry evolving, like, let's talk about this moment, this extended moment for women in sports has been it's been so great to see it. I get so excited. I remember I saw it, and I'll probably chop her name up, but Paige, do you know how to say her last name? Paige, is it
Beckers? Paige Beckers. Yeah.
Who is just, superstar in basketball right now at UConn. When I saw the announcement of Gatorade, I guess you'd say sponsoring her, I was just so excited to be seeing brands starting to spend money more, but then media picking that up. And because I think that even as much progress as we've made, even though the WNBA just celebrated its, I think, 25th anniversary last year, is there's still so much to be done. There's still where I'm like, we should see more brands spending, more media attention, more people spending in this space. And so I would just love your thoughts on that.
I do think brands see the value now in women's sports. And so it's interesting. So our sponsor guy, goes out and he has a lot of conversations. And I think 80% of the conversations now turn to DE&I. And so, we have someone on our staff, Morgan Tuck, a former player, who oversees our fan engagement, fan development, and franchise development. And so we have a platform, Change Can't Wait, which is, all about championing, marginalized communities. And so with Black, Brown, Asian, anti-Semitic, LGBTQ+, we've got all these pillars and programmings around it. And so he came and he said to me, like, we have to continue to build out platforms. Yeah. And I said, listen, what these companies have to understand, it's great that they're interested in Change Can't Wait, but just their act of sponsoring and partnering with a women's team is DE&I. Yeah. It does not have to be Black and Brown. It does not have to be LGBTQ. It strictly can be women as a marginalized community. Yeah. And so trying to just broaden that thought, just come in as a team sponsor in multiple, and listen, and to create programs and platforms for them, but it doesn't have to be the Change Can't Wait platform. It could be just them sponsoring the Connecticut Sun and then building out platforms that help them move their business. And so trying to broaden that thought versus just Black and Brown to women has been an interesting conversation. But, as a brand now, people want to know what you stand for, and it matters. And so I do think that is growing. And I think the biggest change that I feel like I've seen when I was with the Liberty, like if you were a sports fan, you weren't going to come watch a Liberty game. But we just finished a bunch of research, and one of our segments is called Sports Nuts. And that ecosystem of sports nuts are, and I'm speaking New England, are parents of kids or single men that are Red Sox fans, Patriots fans, Celtics, Bruins fans, and they are also Suns fans. So the Sun has become part of their sports ecosystem, where now we are in their consideration set to come to a game and to bring their family, and we'll spend a good amount of money to come to a game. So if the Red Sox and the Sun are playing at the same time, we'll still lose them to the Red Sox. But if the Red Sox are playing at 1 and we're playing at 7, they will give serious consideration to bring their family to the game. And so before that segment didn't exist. And so now we are actually part of the sports nut ecosystem. And I think that is huge.
That is huge. That's huge. I mean, I was a part of the inaugural year of the Seattle Storm way back when, and I remember how hard it was. I mean, Karen Bryant was an amazing ambassador in that community, and so many people were, I mean, she's just the best, but so many people were there because of her. But still, like, just to think again, like how far it's come, and to hear you say that is such a testament to just it catching on. And I don't think enough people understand how long it takes something to catch, like a sport to actually take hold. I mean, I actually don't know the number of years that the MLS has been around, but it's like 20, something like that. I don't. It's a lot.
I feel like it's 20 plus years.
Right, and it's actually, I think a lot of people are absolutely floored when they hear that. Yeah, and it just takes a long time for it to catch on. But I do think it really does require like brands getting involved, believing in it, media, and it's great sport. It's great. And to your point about it being, has a bit of a halo effect, I think, for a brand. I think it just can't be, I guess, lost that consumers more than ever are paying attention to that. They want to buy from something, they want to be loyal to something that actually is walking the talk, that's doing the things and supporting the things that actually mean something.
Yeah, and I think it's good for the league too, right? OPM, other people's money, right? Like when CarMax does a commercial and has Sue Bird and Stephen Curry side by side, how that elevates the league. And how other brands are putting money behind athletes. And so
Mhm.
the more brands also spend money and put our athletes forward, it also helps, right? And it's also like, it's the company you keep, right? So
Yeah.
as a team, right, when you get that first big, great sponsor in, you can
Oh,
now go back out and say, hey, if this is good enough for so-and-so, it has to be good enough for you. And so I think that's important too, to have like the Nikes of the world and those big companies
mm,
support what you're doing, because it is
mhm.
the company you keep for
Yeah.
sure. And that helps legitimize you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So speaking of the season and the WNBA, or I should have said the WNBA and the season that's coming up, you've got
Yeah.
it seems a little bit far away, but it'll be here before you know it. So I looked it up. Saturday, May 7th, folks, mark your calendars. It'll be a
Yeah.
big game against the Liberty. So
Uh-huh.
a little bit of a rivalry, I would assume.
Yeah.
So what you got, really on your line of sight between now and then?
So this week, I believe Thursday, will be 100 days out to our home opener.
Ooh,
So our home opener is Saturday, May 14th against the LA Sparks. And
okay.
the exciting news for us is this is our 20th year in Connecticut.
Oh,
So we started as the Orlando Miracle, and then the Mohegan Tribe bought the team and moved them up to Connecticut. So we were the first independently owned team, not being owned by an NBA team, and also the only team owned by an Indian tribe. And so we celebrate our 20th year in Connecticut. So we have a big 20th celebration planned for opening day. We just finalized our 20th year logo. We've got a whole 20th year plan. We have a jersey retirement we're going to do of a former player this year. We'll have a bunch of like promotions and sweepstakes around the history of our team. We got a lot of good theme nights planned. We've got amazing content teed up from our content team that we're still building out. But so it's our 20th year. We've got a lot of new staff in place. So our event presentation will have a whole new look. So we've got a lot of good energy in the office.
It's a big year. Folks, I didn't actually know it was the 20th year and you had all this stuff lined up. So I'm so excited to hear it. That's fun.
Yeah, so it'll be a big year for us. And I think from a content programming standpoint, we're going to have many new sponsors because of our sponsor guy doing a great job. So I think, we're just pumped, and Jen Rosati came in as the president of the team. And so to have a UConn and a legend of our state leading our team as well is so huge. And she's an amazing leader and an amazing woman to work for. So our office has great energy, and we've got so many fun things coming up in the works. We've got free agent signings we're going to announce next week. So we feel good.
Nice. I love that it seems that your team has fun with the content that you all put out. I remember one day it was like unleashing, air quotes because I know for those who are listening, the season roster, and it was the cutest thing. It had these dogs running out. It was the cutest thing. So I just appreciate that you're talking about you have fun in the office, and it really does come through in the way that you bring the team to market. So I'm excited to watch you guys this year and see everything you're up to.
Yeah, we're excited as well. We're going to be good. We're going to be good. Our home record last year was 15-1. We finished with the best record in the league.
Nice.
We fell short in the playoffs, so I think we feel a little bit pressure this year.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to be really good, and we're going to be fun to watch. So everybody watch out for the Connecticut Sun. You're going to want to come to a game.
That's fantastic. It's funny. I was going to ask you for some predictions for the season, but there you have it, folks. Watch out for the Connecticut Sun. They're going to be making moves and staying at the top of the league. So that's great. Thank you so much for sharing all that. And I just really appreciate, how much you shared, professionally, personally with us, just continuing that, being completely who you are. And I think it's just such a beacon for people to see. And this, again, folks, this is leadership in action. And so before I let you go, I have to ask you about your Peloton mileage for the year. So folks, she does these crazy, and I'm a crazy cyclist myself, so but your mileage game on the Peloton is insane. I was so excited. I think it was last year or the year before, because we hit my husband and I hit some crazy mileage goal, and you like smashed ours. So what's your mileage goal this year?
Well, I didn't smash yours. I think I did my math incorrectly. First of all, you ride for real. Like, I could never do what you do. Like, when you post your rides, I hate to climb. And I'm like, what? Like 7,000 of vert? I'm like, no. I'm like good for endurance. So I could never do what you do.
Okay.
But my goal is I have a 126-week streak going. So I want to keep my streak going for another year. And I'm just over 1,700 rides. So I'd like to get another like 600 or so rides in this year, get over well over 2,000. And if I could get like 2,200 to 2,500 miles in for the year, I'll feel good. Maybe which totals out to between 8,000 and 9,000 minutes on the bike.
Wow. Well, keep it up. You're amazing on the bike, in the boardroom, all the stuff you do. So appreciate you so much, Amy. And folks, connect to Amy, tune into the Connecticut Sun. Thank you so much. You have an amazing day, and say hi to CA for me.
I will. And thank you. Like I've said to you before, like, your energy is something really special. And I don't know anyone else like you. There's just really something that is just really special about you. It's just hard to put your finger on it, but I really, I'm glad that I've met you, and we've just established a nice friendship. And I know I could always count on you and talk to you when I need you. And you're just a really good woman.
Oh,
good human being.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Have an amazing day.
You too. Thanks, Shauna.